You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane. And it's bubbling.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's podcast. I say this week, but we've had a little break.
Yes.
I needed the break.
You needed the break. We all did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We all did. And Vince and I, we took a little break. We went to Mammoth, and Vince and a couple of the guys. I was there, but I can't take any credit. They got the lake record for catching trout.
What?
On Lake Mary. in
Yeah, it was
Mammoth.
awesome.
So
Perfect storm.
Now, who gave him the record?
The marina guy, the guy at the
the
marina
lake
that
guy.
had his picture.
So-
And he was apprehensive about letting the record go. But
Yeah, he
you know.
was. Yeah, it was pretty wild.
That
So-
had to be pretty incredible fish then, right?
Oh, it was unbelievable. It was so many fish. We were making people mad on the lake. You know when you're the only boat on the lake catching fish and you're screaming about it.
No, I've never had that luck.
Yeah.
That's not me.
So here, quick story. This matters because we're talking today about living life in the day and age that you live in, and your physical age as well, and kind of when you're born, making it count, right? All the years that you're given, and so we made it count that day. Up in Mammoth, they had so much snow that you couldn't drive to the fishing spot. They have lakes. You drive up to the lakes, and you couldn't drive up there. And this is in, for those of you out of state, this is in Central California, Central Eastern California. It's a beautiful place, Mammoth Lakes, California.
And we're in July, by the way. There's so much snow.
So-
See, that's the key.
Yeah.
It's
We're in
July.
July.
There's still snowboarding and skiing, right?
There's still
Really?
today. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so snowpack. So we had to take a trolley up there. So we go up there, we take the trolley, then we hike to another trolley, then we take another trolley, and so it's quite a bit.
It's like a dual sport, right? A little hiking, a little fishing.
Yeah, it's an effort to get up there. So we get up there, we rent a boat, and the only way we could get up there is if we rented a boat. So we did. A couple families. So we get on the lake. Vince and Justin Kraus, and Vince's son Huntington, they just caught so many fish. I didn't have my license that day, so I was kind of helping my daughters, but I didn't get to catch any fish. But that's okay. They caught a ton of fish. It was really interesting watching them catch fish. So after that, you have the fish. You have to do something with them, right? So they had a
Clean them, you mean?
well, you have to take them, right? Because you can't clean them at the lake. So they had an ice chest. So Vince put all these trout, and these were how big were these?
They're 4 to 7, 8 pound trout.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I thought you got 3 foot. You were showing your hands there. I thought
No, they're that long.
They were
You
that
don't
big.
fish
No,
there,
they're
right?
that big. Yeah,
They
yeah.
were that big. I'm not kidding.
they weren't stocked fish. They just stocked.
They were stocked fish, but here's the thing: it's July, right? So the
Oh.
stalkers grew from March till July
Okay.
up in Oregon. They brought them down that day. They dumped them right in the lake, and it was just
It was
fish
just
catching
nuts.
season, right? And
They
so
were fasting until that moment.
And the guy said at the thing, yeah, they're kind of lazy when they come out, so you might not catch anything.
they were starving.
They were starving.
They were starving fish, but they were huge.
They were
right?
chasing power bait.
Well, they also had these right. Anyway, the point is that Vince, I have a new respect for Vince because he loaded all those fish into an ice chest and he carried them on the trolley.
Oh gosh.
Okay, that is a good deal.
What'd you do with them? Did you in your freezer or where?
Oh yeah, we have a whole freezer full of.
Wow.
We flayed them out because they were so big. You didn't have to.
Yeah.
You usually have to
Right,
gut them
right.
and then you have to eat the bones. They were so big, you just
They
flayed them all out.
They
and
were
we vacuumed.
pink like salmon.
Yeah, they were delicious. We had
They
them that
were very
night.
good. Yeah.
But
awesome.
but the best
Well-
part of that is I got to act like a kid again. Speaking of age,
Yeah.
it just brought me back to like a childhood memory. I was like falling over the boat. Somebody caught. I went to go catch a fish for the boat with the net because we kept breaking them off, and somebody grabbed my legs as I was falling over the boat. They're like,
Yeah,
yeah,
Oh,
it
you were
was-
you were doing a header in the water.
Oh,
huh?
it
was
was-
fun.
it
Well,
was
you and
happening.
I have a record that Vince doesn't have though,
What's that?
of a bear coming out of the woods and eating our fish at Mammoth.
Yes, same lake.
That's a good.
A
That's
bear
a good
came
record.
out. Bear came out of the woods and ate our fish that was on the stringer.
Yeah.
We had to just back up and let him have them.
That bear. Was
I
a
would
bully.
too. Back up and let him.
Yeah,
have it.
he was walking around
And,
taking.
and that's a
everyone's
fish story you tell when you don't catch fish.
Yes.
You're like, hey, the bear got him, guys.
Yes. Well, you know
We
what?
had fish.
Before we go, Chris Leatham from Idaho sent us some really cool gifts, and I just got them yesterday, and I really like that cap, man. He went out and had some items personalized with Off the Mountain podcast.
Yeah.
And you guys each got a
mug.
A
Yep.
mug.
I haven't received it yet, but I heard about it and I'm
Yeah.
excited. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
I got
Chris.
a cool cap.
That is so kind of you. So cool. We have listeners from across the country right now, and they've connected through different ways. Some of them have connected through listening to you, Dad, on the radio, and some of it have connected through just watching services online, and some have just found us organically.
Yeah, we
And
had some people in church yesterday from Louisiana, really cool family.
Yeah, and so
And they listened to us online for a long time.
for those
And,
of you that don't know, we all work for Valley Bible Fellowship, and but we started this podcast as kind of a sidestep of that, so that we could connect with all of you out there that we wouldn't normally be able to connect with. And so,
yeah, and I said earlier I needed a break. My brain was just tired. That's the first year I probably in ages that I really felt I had a tired brain. I was doing so much with Las Vegas church here, back and forth, that man, it just felt refreshing, and I feel really, really happy to be back today.
well, your
So-
vacations are partly working vacations, but
Usually.
you took a little bit of rest.
This year
so
I
that's good.
kind of got bored. So,
Yeah.
but living with age in mind, you can't stop the aging process. You can't stop it, because I know I'm older than you guys. Try as hard as you want, that you're not going to stop it. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but sometimes it's kind of pathetic when you see people really trying overly hard to beat the aging process, because you're not going to do it. Now, I'm not saying you're not to be yourself. I mean, be yourself. But you know what I'm talking about? People that really fight so hard. I mean, I myself, I wore tennis shoes, blue jeans, T-shirt since I was in high school. And, I've lifted weights since I was 13 years old. And just be yourself. Mick Jagger is himself. I don't see him trying to be, he's just himself. And so it's okay to do the best you can do, but I'm saying overly work. You've seen people with 20 plastic surgeries, and their faces look horrible. Some of them do. Some look good, I guess. But you know what I'm talking about. You're going to age. Do the best you can do to be yourself and maintain whatever youth you can. But it's going to catch you all to some degree. It's just going to catch you.
Yeah, I've been watching a show on Disney Plus. It's Chris Hemsworth, and it's called Limitless, and he talks about living longer basically and being healthy, and they go through all these different processes. One of them was about fasting, and that's something you've been talking to me about, Dad. Is the benefits, and Tom, you've been talking to us as well about the benefits of fasting and how your body will actually start to repair itself. And so there are things we can do to live
Josh,
better
I
lives.
am so pro fasting, and I taught a health class last night. And this process called autophagy, you've heard me talk about it on the podcast for. Go look it up. I am sold on fasting, especially long fasts of 72 hours, just water. It's all you have. But I have a good friend here in Bakersfield, and you guys know him, and he has cancer, and I mean some pretty serious cancer. And he fasts once a month, 72 hours water fast. And his doctors are amazed, and I'm amazed that with the seriousness of his cancer, it's not moving. It's not growing, man. He has stopped it in its tracks. And I could go on and on about this fasting thing. And so I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to do the best you can do. I really feel right now that I'm in the best shape I've been in 30 years. I feel it anyway. I just feel really good. I go work out 40 minutes in the morning in the gym. I go do cardio 40 minutes, and then I go out in the sun to get 15 minutes of D3, and then I do fasting 3 days every other month. And so I really, really feel good at my age.
You're
So-
aging. You're aging well.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And so I'm not saying you don't try to do that.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying with people that overly try to fight it, because
Right.
you're going to win it a lot if you take care of yourself and do the right things. But you're going to age. It's just going to happen. And what I've said before, Josh, is whatever you do in your 20s will prepare you for your 30s. However you live in your 30s will prepare yourself for your 40s. And on and on and on. So right now, you guys, whatever you're doing in this decade will prepare your life for the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think age shocks you a little bit. Like, I remember waking up and seeing some gray hairs one morning, like in my early 30s, and thinking like, oh yeah, I have some grays, no big deal. Those won't probably come in for a long, long time. And then all of a sudden it's like wildfire, all of a sudden my hair is, almost gray, and in your natural part of you wants to fight it. Like you said, it's the overreaction of like, okay, I'm getting old, I gotta dye my grays out, and then at some point you're like, whatever, I'm gonna go with it. And then you're like, oh, now my skin's deteriorating, and so it's like all these things that you want to basically ward off. There's that natural tendency, I think, with people, it's just natural to want to ward off some of that aging process. And then there's that part
Well,
where
there's
you just
fear
live with
too.
it.
I mean,
Well,
there's fear,
let me give
right?
you 2 verses real quick. Proverbs 16:31. Gray hair is a crown of glory. It is gained in a righteous life. And then Proverbs 20:29. The glory of young men is in their strength, but the splendor of old men is their gray hair. And I covered all mine up yesterday with color. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny how that stuff happens. I mean, I when I'm on vacation, I let my hair go gray. My kids are always like, Dad, dye your hair. I'm like, okay. Well, if my kids are pushing me to or twisting my arm, they're like, hey, we'll do it for you.
That'd make me cry if my kids were like, you need to dye your hair, Dad. You're so great.
I don't mind gray hair, but on the big screen, it kind of
Yeah.
makes you look washed out.
Yeah.
Well, there again, we all spend a lot of
Put a little
time.
bit of color in it.
We all spend a lot of time in front of audiences,
Yes.
and I think sometimes it's part of what you do, right?
I did that old, the app that you used to. It was really popular a few
Aged
years
you?
ago. Yeah, that aged you. So I did that about 3 or 4 years ago, and I kept the picture on my phone. And I looked at that picture, and then I looked at a recent picture, and then I looked at that picture, and then I looked at my recent picture.
It was
I
it was
like,
close.
They were too close. They were too close, Tom.
I jotted down
that bothered
5 things that I wished I would have done differently in my younger years. And I think these are teaching points for a lot of the younger guys out there, 25, 35, 45, maybe even 50. I still call that young guys.
I'll take that.
But 5 things, and I think you can probably bear witness to these, at least relate to them. Number 1, as I look back in my younger years, I wished I would have got therapy for my sports injuries, shoulder, leg, hip. I didn't give them a lot of thought back then because I got along. I would, my shoulder would fall out of place, and my dad would take me out by the mailbox and push it back in.
You improvised.
I improvised, and today, because of arthritis and different things, I'm having problems with those areas. Like right now, I have a shoulder been throbbing. It's a shoulder. I had surgery on a shoulder, and it's been throbbing and throbbing. And every once in a while, it does that when I'm in the gym lifting weights, and it goes back to sports injuries I didn't take care of.
Yep. Yeah,
Can you relate to that?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had some major sports injuries, and I have had therapy, physical therapy. I've had other therapy too, but it's physical therapy has really helped a lot. It's been, but here's the thing. It helps, but then you have to continue doing the exercises. You have to continue doing the stretches. So, it goes back to just exercise in general. You two, and you too, Vince. You guys are all very, very, very disciplined on your exercise. You always move your bodies, and that's so good. I think that I have made the mistake where I've gone to physical therapy, I've started the process, and then I'll just get busy and I won't prioritize working out. But now I'm at the point where I have to prioritize it. It's when we were young, Dad. When you were in your 30s. It wasn't known that working out, that physical exercise was kind of a key component to living, was it? I mean, it was kind of like
there wasn't a premium on it at all.
was a
that part of
vanity.
the science hadn't come in yet.
right. Yeah. And so now I think that some of the older folks out there that are, in their 60s and 70s, they haven't done it, their whole life, but they can start, right? I mean, can't they start?
Oh, absolutely. You can start at any age.
And get into a good routine. And you might not be able to do everything that a 30-year-old can do, but you can start. And so I think that developing those habits on a day-to-day basis is really important. You talked to me about you were going to get me a gym membership, but I told you no because I which is terrible. But I appreciated that. But I walked into the gym the other day, and it just gave me anxiety because there's so many people in there. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get a machine? How am I going to be able to get my workout done?
Wrong time you can't hardly.
So I freaked out. And so I just went and bought some weights at my local Dick's Sporting Goods. And so now I have a place. So I'm making it work for me.
So funny. Your mother and I talk about this all the time. You are so much like your mother. And our daughter Tara is so much like me. I can't work out at home. I just can't. I have to go to a gym. And I like the vibes there. It kind of gets me into the mood. Of course, you have to find the times, and every gym has those times where they're not real crowded. I go to my particular gym at like 8:15, 8:20, 8:30. There's very few people in there, and I always get my machines. I think I'm just lucked out. I have lucked out. So anyway, going back, what I want to say to the younger people today is if you get injured, take care of that injury.
Yeah.
Go get some therapy, take care of it, and make sure it doesn't come back to haunt you in your older years like mine are.
Because it does. I remember
That's
my
good.
first knee injury, and I went to see a famous orthopedic, Curlin Job. And as he looked at me, he was like, "Hey, ACL needs to be repaired." I go, "Okay, so what does that mean?" He goes, "Tom, because with my athletics, I mean, I couldn't take off." And he goes, "Can you afford 6 months off?" And I go, "No." He goes, "Well, then you need to work around it." Because I had to lift heavy weights.
Because your physical fitness was your job.
Yeah, it was how I got paid. So I couldn't take it off. So then I'd come in with a shoulder injury, and he's like, "Tom, you need to take time." So now I just tell my wife, and just a joke between her and I, if I ever am unconscious and get an MRI, I told her to only let them fix what is wrong with me while I'm in there. Because they'll look at my body and want to fix it all. And they'll go, "He's a wreck." And I said, just let him fix everything else I've made do with.
Right.
And I've just worked around all these stuff. So I wish I could have taken time off.
Yes.
But, one of the things I always like to tell people is that there's more than one way to exercise. The old adage is one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
You don't always have to do one movement to affect the muscle.
Well, what are those
group.
guys doing in the gym? And usually it's older guys. They go in and load all this weight up, and they move 2 inches.
Yeah, it doesn't do
They
it.
do 2 inches. Does that do any good?
No. One of the big things I tell a lot of people who are exercising nowadays, 'cause I get to speak a lot now with aging and working out, and I tell people that to do functional things. And I say, for older guys, and you can
Right.
account for that. These guys can't. There's something we do 2 or 3 times a day, and there's something that you can tell helps older people because it's usually installed in their restrooms or their bathrooms when they get older. They're handrails. So I tell people you should be able to do a squat movement. And that doesn't mean put weight on your back, because you're squatting down for that movement, right? 2 or 3 times
Great
a day.
analogy. The toilet. I'm still in the toilet.
But I'm saying, but if you can't squat down, you're needed. So
Mobility.
incorporate a squatting
Right.
movement, which means you don't have to put weight on your back. Just do a free squat.
But they put their weight in their back and they go 2 inches down, 2
Yes.
inches. They just
Well,
move a little teeny
yeah,
bit.
That's not helping your mobility at all, right?
No, that's what I'm saying. So functional training is probably a big key when you get older. It's like, a lot of people will lose their strength in pushing up. And Pastor's got an injury, but you want to do a pressing movement, because a lot of people are trying to put something on a shelf, and that just gets older.
But you told me at my age, it's good to do 12 to 15 reps.
Yes.
So I've lightened my weight, and I do a lot more repetitions.
But you find that your weight can go up in that lightening, right, Ned?
I've started going up for today.
Yes.
And yes, this week was the first week. Oh, I'm all tongue-tied today. Last week was the first time in a long time that I went up weight.
Because strength will increase whether you're doing reps or you're doing low reps or high reps. So, work within that. But if older people are out there, do something functional.
Yeah.
Do a curl. That means when you pick stuff up, you can curl it. Just whatever's functional in your life, just do
Curl
that.
the grocery bags when you help your wife carry the groceries in.
Yeah. Hey,
Curl them, and you can do a set while you're taking them to the kitchen.
I will tell you this: if you want a challenge, those Costco water bottles, I think they have like 36 or 8 now. Carrying those from your car to your pantry,
Right.
I almost had to put it down in the middle.
Well, you just
the other day.
on the way into the house, you could do a set of squats
Yes.
with them,
Oh man.
and then you could do some overheads with them, and you could get your workout
You
in
totally
just as you're
could.
doing chores.
I got a lot stronger when I had kids because you
pick 'em up.
You're picking them up, putting them down, picking them up,
Yes.
putting them down.
A lot of people will end up with back injuries with kids because you starting to, do a repetitive motion again. So functionality. There's even gyms now called, like we have a new one in town called F45, functional 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So all they're working out is basically functional movements.
That's Wahlberg's.
I want our younger men and women to really gain some insight in this podcast today. What's the next thing I would have done differently in my younger years? I would have went to the doctor more for annual checkups. Most everybody knows that, I had prostate cancer. I got my prostate out, and I've had chemical reoccurrence. The prostate cancer has come back, and I'm doing great, just fantastic. But what happened was I didn't go to the doctor enough. I went one time and years ago, and they said, you know what, you could have prostate cancer. We don't think so. That's cool. I'll see you again in 5 years. And I waited a long time to get that cancer taken care of. And as a result, it's come back today. And it has to do with me waiting so long. And so I say to you younger guys, as you age, continue with your annual physical checkups at the doctor. Because when they find stuff, in its first stages, whether it's cancer, heart disease, whatever, they can take care of it real quickly. But man, do not stop going to the doctor and get your annual checkups. And when there's something, deal with it. I waited too long. Had I not waited so long, I wouldn't be dealing with this chemical recurrence that I have today.
One of the bigger concerns that I have is there's physical, but there's also mental. I'm worried about my mental, clarity and making sure that my mental doesn't decline. That that there's not. And so, what do you guys do to make sure that you stay sharp? Because you guys are both very sharp, and you're not that old,
But there's exercises you can do. I mean, really, honestly, when I'm going to the gym, I will multiply and divide in my head.
Okay.
Because they say when you do that, it's putting, adding blood and the neurons and things where you're
So mental
computing numbers.
exercises.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll talk
makes
to you
sense.
about that, and they say, don't do it, just do it in your head.
I watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
That's true.
I watch the replays all the time.
That's good.
And I watch those kind of shows, and I try to answer the questions.
So
and
you
I-
guys are actually intentional about
Yes.
exercise.
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Your brain.
They also talk
Absolutely.
about to add some to that. They talk about blue zones a lot, and a lot of these blue zones they talk about health and these people that live longer in these blue zones. And one of the things they talk about with mental and physical health is just being part of community too. They
Yeah.
say a lot of people that are older, if they have good community, their mental health goes way through the roof, and so does their physical health. But their mental health takes an extreme.
Malcolm
How many older
Gladwell did
people do you
talk about
see that they just sit around and watch TV? They become a couch potato.
Right? They don't have a lot of.
And they don't do
community.
anything.
Well, and I think that's why it's important to be able to, find a group. And I think a lot of people will shy away from that stuff, but it's important to find a
is.
group that you
Yeah.
can. And whether you're at church and you're plugged in with that, or maybe Rotary, or maybe a, something that would, through veterans. But
if you are a loner, it's gonna be
Yes.
harder to stay sharp.
Again, what you do in your 30s prepares you for your 40s, on and on. You've got to always look ahead and stay on these things.
You said it. I'm a lot like Mom. Mom and I are both probably introverts, right? I think we'd rather avoid the crowd than be in the crowd. But my wife is an extrovert, and so I married somebody who wants to be around people a lot, and so it's good. I have like a balance,
Yeah, your mother, she hates gyms, and you don't seem to like them. Tara and I both really like our gyms, and but I could go on and on about the ways you're like your mother more, and Tara's like me. But the third thing is, as I look back on my younger years, I wished I would have stayed in a house that I really liked and paid it off. One in which my kids could come home and have memories. That might sound kind of trivial to some, but
No,
I
that's
wished I would
important.
have.
No, I'm actually in that stage right now. We had just we went and visited Ventura this last weekend, and we lived there for a good stint. And my oldest, who's going to be 16, is we had not been surfing since he's developed all this new muscle and his ability to swim so fast. So we went out surfing, and he was just catching waves. Talk about age. I would be able to go out and out paddle him, and he just got right in that water and was gone and was way out in the deep. I was telling Josh, I was like, he was catching waves faster than I can even get out to the next wave, and I was like, this isn't fair. What happened? He's like, Dad, what's going on with you? Tired? I'm like, no.
Throw the tire.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm just
Gauntlet
watching. I'm
down.
just watching you. I'm just watching. you.
Tom and Josh might know this as well as you and I, but it's a very humbling moment when you have a boy, and it can happen with girls too, but they start passing you in all those kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
They're able to do more than you, able to lift more than you,
yeah.
able to beat you in racquetball, and that comes at about, 16, 17, 18 years of age.
Well, Tom's daughters are athletes, so
Oh, yeah.
he's
My
had to
girls-
deal with that.
That's not fun. But my son-in-law, during the pandemic, a few years back, I got some weights at the house, and he's like, "Hey, can I come over?" And I go, "Yeah." And my wife goes, "Hey, you really need to just make sure you guys don't get the testosterone going." And I go, "Honey,
Too
that's
late.
easier said
Too
than
late."
done." So as Danny would leave, we would kill it. Oh my gosh! And then later I'd be limping, and my wife. So finally, my son-in-law came over one day and go, "Hey, I think we need to pull the plug on this," because he's big and strong. He played football, Fresno, and big, strong kid. He's still big, and 6'2", I think now, and he's 260. Just a big kid and a strong kid. And he, on the other side of it, he wasn't going to let me win. It was just
Right. Yeah.
Well,
That's funny.
going back to that, just the Ventura, obviously, my Huntington's go, "Do you miss living here?" I'm like, "Yeah." But I wouldn't move back at this point because I know my kids are settled into school. It's really important for them to have good
Yes.
community. It's really important for my daughter. She's also about to start high school, for her to have good community. We're plugged in with the church. And so to trade all that, yes, living at the beach is amazing. And yes, we want to uproot, but we're really stable where we're at. And so the mature part of me is like being stable, almost having your house paid off. Those things are really, really important. When you're younger, you're just like, oh, we're just going to go for it. But that is really good because I think a lot of people, they look over the fence a lot thinking, what are we missing
Let
out
me
on?
also add, too,
Yeah.
for those out there that maybe have the ability to do this, make sure you get into a house that you like.
Yeah.
You know, that you want to spend a lot of years there. We're losing a staff member in Vegas. And where he lives at right now, he said, Pastor, my kids can't go out in the yard and play, on and on. And so I've spoken with him and talked to him about what he's going to do. He's going back in, believe it or not, the Nashville area.
I love that.
And he said, I've always wanted a house with a little creek in the back where my kids can run and play and have some room. And so I say to some of you young men and women that are listening today, if you have the means and the ability, maybe you do want to move, get into a house that you feel like, I want to live here for some years. And I want to develop memories here. But I look at some of my friends now, and their home's been paid off forever. I moved around so much, I never got a home paid for. Plus, you know, their kids are able to come home, and they have memories of when I was 8 and 10 and 12. And so, you know, in more areas than one, some of you younger guys and gals, find out where you want to be for the next 10 years, whether that be living in a house, a city, wherever, and then lay roots down and stay put. I think that's good advice. Stay put.
We talked about this at the Marriage Retreat in our breakout session. We also said don't put a time factor on, you know, where you want to be as far as like your dream house, because you might be listening, you might be 20 years old, 21, 22, 23, maybe 25. You're just getting married and you're like, the first thing you think you should do is buy a house. Like you're like, everybody told you buy a house. And that might be a good investment for you depending on where you're on your career, but also don't put that financial burden or stress on your marriage if you aren't ready. Like you said, I love what you said.
If you have the ability and if you're at that place.
Save, spend some time, and then buy the house that you're able to buy your dream house together. But don't put a time limit. When we talk about aging, we always put a time like, well, you know, by 30, I should have this much money and I should have this job and I should had finished school and whatever. It's like, there's no time. Like, you can't put a time on the thing that, you know, is important to you. So it's really important that
the housing market's also
don't
blown
rush
up,
stuff.
and so young people,
it's huge.
are living in a different age than we were. You know,
Well, this other point I wrote down goes on the tail end of what we just said. I wished I would have given my kids more memories. Now, I gave you quite a few memories. Tara, not many at all. I mean, with you, I coached your ball teams, and I took you to Israel, and we did a lot of things. With Tara, not so much, but take a lot of pictures, have a lot of memories. And I believe you and Ashley are real good at this. You're starting out very well, and Jim and Tara have been pros at it, giving their kids a lot of memories. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you are, developing a very pleasant household, if you and your wife get along and there's a good spirit in the home, your kids aren't going to ever really want to leave. And when they do leave, they'll keep coming back.
you know,
But if you're fighting all the time and you got a house disunity and it's ugly, when the kids get married, they won't come back very often. And so I think we're all a testimony that we've probably done a pretty good job in that area.
my wife was, she has a box of all the things the girls have made, you know, and there's also photos in there. So she pulled the box out, and I walk into the room, and she's crying, right, because she's sad that that
They're not little anymore.
Time flies, right, so quickly, and I was watching this happen, and my daughters both came in. And they started consoling her, and they're like, "It's okay, mommy," And then they start going through the stuff, and they're like, "Remember this? And in that moment, I had a thought, and I felt like it was profound for me. I thought, okay, this right here is a lesson for me to be present right here, right now, because my kids, yes, I miss the stage that they were at before, but now they're at this stage. And so the best thing that I can do is to be as present as possible, and to really, there's a difference between being at home and you're on your computer and the TV's on and you're worried about 5 things that you haven't done, or maybe you're worried about something needs to happen in the house. There's a difference between that and just sitting down and playing with your kids and seeing, you know, the color of their hair and the color of their eyes and the smiles. And I was just watching my girls just this morning, actually.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're so just cool, you know, they're so neat, you know, like it's they have little personalities, they have these little bodies, these little minds, and they're little people with
You're seeing them shaped.
You know?
I told
am,
the story.
yeah.
I told the story Sunday that we had your little one. She's 3, and Debbie took her into Target or whatever, and they're walking to the car, and she pulls a pack of gum out of her pocket and goes, "Aha, aha!" And your mother said, "Romy, did you take that?" Aha! And so we have to go back in now and pay for that gum. And so we see their little personalities being molded, shaped. We had your girls.
I asked her about that. I said,
What?
Romy, did you steal a piece of gum or some gum? And she said, no, I didn't, Daddy. And then she said, I did.
Well,
I love that she said, aha.
we had your kids last week,
Oh, I did.
and I was trying to work. Okay, and they came in with a little pad and pen.
Good
And
luck.
sir, what would you like to order at the restaurant today? And I'm trying to work, and so I tell them what I want, and then they come back and they brought me the wrong order 2 or 3 times, and so it was a whole ordeal. But I validate what you just said. It's time to put the work down,
Yeah.
play with them for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you know, it's important to save money too, right? It's important to do this stuff and be responsible.
Yes.
But it's also important to have experiences, and so, you know, budget in your experiences that you have, you know, when you're young.
Yeah, and it's one of the things my wife would always insist that we took vacations.
Right.
Always.
Right,
you know.
right.
We just got back from Nashville and quite a few states. But my kids, Tessa and Taylor and Danny, my son-in-law, were there downstairs, and Tiff and I came down, and they looked at us, and they go, so we can't do any more holidays without family. And I said, so we made some plans. They wanted us to be together. And my daughter goes, of course, at that time, it was 10 more months before we moved back there. And my daughter, Tessa, goes, I think I can do 10 more months, but I can't do much more than that. You know, but they wanted us. They want us
good.
back there.
That shows
they want
you-
us to be
you
part
raised them
of
right.
that. But it was one where, you know, Tiff and I go, okay, we've got to make, you know, we heard this, so now we got to make plans to be able to do that
Right.
before, you know, for June,
So-
because they wanted to do it. And I think there's, like you said, Josh, it may not be convenient,
Right.
but it's doable.
So it's funny because we're talking about, you know, living in the age that we're born into.
We're going there anyway.
right?
We're going to get to that.
But in that perspective, it makes me think that, you know, it's really pretty simple. Like, we just have to prioritize, right? We have to realize what's important. We have to not allow people that want to steal your time, because there are people that will waste your
Yes.
time. And then there are people that will they will take advantage, right? And those people that sometimes we work with, or sometimes they're family members or whatever. And we have to make sure that we protect our time, right?
I've already told 2 people since yesterday, no. You know, I really would like to, but I can't.
Right.
And it leads me to my last one that I wrote down is when I look back on my younger years, I wished I would have found an older mentor, an older coach, life coach. That person would have saved me a lot of heartache and trouble. I was in the gym last week. Don't like I live in the gym, but I overheard a young lady telling the young man she was with some of the issues she was going through. And he was pouring out advice to her, and I was on that machine for 3 or 4 sets, so I heard most of it. I thought that's some of the dumbest advice I've ever heard. I've been there, done it. That is not going to work. I hope this young lady doesn't listen to you. And the Bible says very explicitly that we're to go to elders, older people, get advice, get wisdom, get counsel. So I wished I would have latched onto a mentor in my younger years and maybe listened to some of the advice he probably would have given me.
Everybody needs a coach. I think it's important.
Oh.
I think we overlook the fact that we need some kind of coach in our life. Even the best athletes, we talked about this in another podcast, the best athletes in the world have coaches, not because that the coaches are better than them where they're at. It's just because they can see things that you can't see when you're on the field or when you're on the court, and that's important.
You know, I was asked to come back to my old alma mater, Sal High, before I went on vacation. And they asked me to speak to the summer bridge kids, the freshmen, all the freshmen that are coming into the school. And I was thinking, what am I going to talk to these kids about? And they brought me back in because I'm in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, as I was sitting there, I was telling them, when you're going to school and you're 13 to 17 or 18, you're not thinking about coming back, being part of the Hall of Fame. You're just trying to survive.
Right.
So I was telling these kids, I was sitting where you were. make the most out of it. And I even said something else, and they all looked at me, and then my wife goes, "You didn't say that." I go, "I did say that." I looked at all these kids and said, "Hey, not a lot of people expect a lot out of you guys because you don't come from the popular school. You guys aren't
Right.
setting the world on fire with academics or sports, but why not be the difference?" And I said, there are so many coaches in this school that will help you, because that's the only way I got through it. It wasn't my dad.
Yeah.
It was people that invested in me, and they wanted to exploit my athletic ability, but that's okay because they deposited things in me. So I told them, there's teachers in this school that will help you.
Yeah.
There's people there that will, but sometimes you got to receive the help. Like you said, Pastor, you got to look for that as you're going out there. And that's how you become successful as a freshman, because you're not going to make it, and, you need that help. So
My wife challenges me. He goes, "Come on, you're stubborn. Would you have really taken their advice if you had a mentor?" I said, if I respected the guy,
Yes.
if I really respected him, yes, I would have.
it's one of those things where a lot of people want these things, and you'll build up a little bit of pride, especially as young boys. And I think maybe girls might have a little bit different personality, but boys, I think as those mentors are out there, and I think they're out there all day long, as they start to realize that there's a relationship developing, they need to foster that.
Well, it's huge
In
what
a
you just
healthy way.
said with younger people. Now, role models are hard because they may have never seen a good example of a role model. They may have been raised in a bad home, so to earn somebody's trust is huge. And so we have to be, diligent as we might be, we're role models in some ways. We have this podcast, but we have to realize that people aren't just going to let you in just because, you have to earn, like you said, that trust. And that's huge. And if you're younger and you haven't had a good example of a role model, like Pastor said, find that person that you can respect. and
They're
trust.
out there.
Where would
Yeah,
you
and
find
look
him
at
at?
the way-
Where would you? I'll tell you one place.
Oh, yeah.
Get into a small group in a church or whatever.
Yeah.
And what you want to look for is someone who has shown some success in their marriage, in their life,
Yeah.
in their vocation. And again, I put more emphasis on experience today than I ever have. When you get older and you look back, you've been through so many things, and you very often, unfortunately, you've learned the hard way by skinning up your nose.
I think discipline and consistency is huge too. Like, look for somebody that has a lot of consistency and discipline, where you might have somebody come in and say, blah, 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 and then you don't see them forever. And I think that would be a tall tale sign for the most part of, like,
It's true.
that's probably not your role model, but somebody that's consistent and somebody that is highly disciplined. It might even be somebody, like you just keep mentioning the gym. You see that guy, you might be a teenager, and you see that guy that's always there at 6 a.m. And, I'm not saying go walk up to a random stranger,
Right.
but somebody that has some sort of discipline will probably be pretty consistent.
I
with
love what
they're telling
Pastor
you.
said, because I think church is a good place to find somebody,
huge.
but I think there's others. You have to be intentional, because you've got to put yourself in a place that gives you an opportunity to find somebody. So if you're out there and you're young, join a group, join jujitsu, join a boxing group where somebody is out there and you're learning something, how to do it. Join a painting class,
Right.
because you're going to put yourself in a position to more likely get somebody to mentor you by joining something
it's
or being part of it. And that's even if you're in high school or college. Do everything they have. I mean, if they're offering it, join. If they're giving
I'm talking about a life coach, though, too. And of course, as a Christian, I'm going to put a real priority
Yes.
on that person being a born-again, spirit-led believer. I don't want someone speaking into my life that isn't that, because we got to be careful who we open our hearts and minds up to. So I agree with Tom as far as mentoring in certain areas, but for a life coach, I'm going to put a big premise on it's got to be born-again, spirit-filled person, because I just won't open my mind and heart up to anybody to speak into it.
if you're a
that's
believer,
important.
you need to find a believer. If you're out
Yes.
there and you're not a believer,
Then you go whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just do whatever. But I think we're probably on a different thought pattern here about our subject. But I thought we were supposed to talk about the challenge of living in the age we're living in today.
Well, I think that might be part 2.
Okay.
It could be. I mean, how much time? Where are we at right now on time?
I
We'll
think
probably
we're
have
good.
another 20 minutes, but let me start it off and see if you
Okay.
want to go this direction.
Yeah.
I believe with all of my heart that we're living in the last days. Okay? And 4 reasons for that. Number 1 is the Old Testament prophecies, especially in Ezekiel and Daniel, that concern the nation Israel. One prophecy that I just have been so excited about, and this prophecy just blows me away in the Bible, and that's the 70 weeks of time in Daniel. It's a prophecy Daniel made. And if you go back and look at that now, Daniel had been held hostage in Babylon for decades. When something in the book of Jeremiah that he was reading caught his attention, and all of a sudden it dawned on him that our captivity in Babylon was supposed to be 70 years only. And he goes, aha, we're at almost 70 years right now. And he got very excited. And he fell down to his knees and started confessing sins and stuff. He was so moved by the new knowledge that he had that we're fixing to go free. And while he was down praying, the angel Gabriel came into the room. And he gave him the 70 weeks prophecy, and it's really crazy. And I don't have time to get into it, obviously, in this podcast, but this 70 weeks prophecy that Gabriel gave him told of about a series of events that began in his lifetime and would continue to go on until the second coming of Christ. I mean, it's just a phenomenal prophecy. It's mind-boggling. In this prophecy, you can count off the exact years from when a command was given by King Artaxerxes to go rebuild the city of Jerusalem until the coming of the Son of Man. And he gave that command in, we think it was March 14th, around 445 BC. And if you go back, now remember, Daniel lived hundreds of years before Jesus. And he has this prophecy that apparently was given to him by an angel. And the angel says, look, you're going to see a decree given to go rebuild the city of Jerusalem. When you see that decree given, mark off these years. At the end of those years, you will see Messiah on the earth. And I did the math on the board one day. Now, I did the math. I did all the numbers on the board, and it comes right out to Jesus entering Jerusalem on the back of an ass colt. And when he enters the city, he starts weeping. He says, if you only knew this moment. And this was recorded hundreds of years earlier. And so I say all that to say that we're in the last days, and if Daniel's prophecy could be that accurate concerning that time until Messiah came, if it's that accurate, then everything else in the Bible is going to be equally as accurate. And so what I'm saying to you today is Jesus came just like it was recorded. And then it goes on and says Israel's going to be brought home and they'll be reunified. And that happened in May 1948. And if I read the Bible correctly, it says that generation that sees that date, May 1948, not all those people will pass away until everything happens. The return of Jesus Christ, everything. So that's a lot of words to say. And I've got other reasons too if we continue on this vein of thought. But we're in the last days. And if we're in the last days, we're going to have to really think about the way we're living in every area. And I've got a lot to say now. Now I'm in my groove, okay? So you better start butting in and talking, because if we're to live the way we're supposed to live in this age, then there's a lot of things we need to be doing.
Like what?
Okay. For example, we've got to think about the education our kids are getting. We got to think about how the world's trying to press them into the mold, because if you go back, and if I had time to read some verses in the New Testament, it says in the last days, this will be the characteristics of your culture. Oh my goodness. For example, I mentioned before on this broadcast, the importance of the rule of first mention. Your kids now, because we're in the last days, and you're going to have a very, very ungodly spirit in the last days. You're going to have a real falling away from the faith. You're going to have a lot of people that have agendas in the last days, a lot more than before. We're going to have to really take the time out to make sure our kids hear about our spiritual values before they get caught up too far in the educational system. Because again, the rule of first mention, as I explained it some time ago, is that when our children hear a truth, a major truth for the very first time, that time is going to be so impacting that from then on, they will always run any other experience that's contradictory through the grid of what they learned the very first time. So we're going to have to, do some things that we might not have had to do if it was 100 years earlier.
Well,
because we're in the last days.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that we worry about as parents that you guys probably didn't worry about Like
No, not at all.
You know, kids getting a hold of a phone and finding something they shouldn't find at a very young age.
Right.
There are kids that are talking about things that were never talked about at a very young age. We're having to start talking to my daughter already about, you know, sex and different things like that because it's talked about in school because the amount of information that is being shared with kids is much higher. And so there's that. We're talking to them about God. We're talking to them. We're talking to them about how to treat each other. I think that Vince has a good perspective on this. Is, you know, as a society, we put so much weight on education. Yes, they're there for a long time, and we need to make sure that, you know, our kids get in the right school, and we need to really pray that through. And I think that's different for everyone. But ultimately, it starts at the home, right? It really does.
It's always at the home.
Yeah.
And Josh, we see the fruit of it. You might not see it as much as us as grandparents. I told you the day I was in some conversation on the phone. Olive was there, your daughter. She was listening, I guess, to what I was saying. Your daughter does. She acts like she's playing, but she's listening. And she came in and put her finger in my face and says, Pop, you need to be real nice to this person that's being mean to you.
Yeah.
And now, what did you think about what I said Sunday in my sermon? I was reading Newsfeed, and I think it's Eva Mendez. Is that the right name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Married to Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
And how that she came out public, and they were making a big to-do about it, and said that her kids were not old enough to have the internet. They weren't mature enough, and they were not going to have access to the internet.
They seem like pretty intentional parents, and I think that, you know, they've lived in that Hollywood sphere, and they are very private. They're known to be private, and so I think they are very protective over their family, as they should be. And I think that, you know, every single parent should be protective of their kids. As far as the internet goes, Vince has a rule in his house where they unplug the internet at night. And that's wise. That's very smart. My kids don't have access to any type of device.
How old should kids
because
be
they're
before
little,
they're allowed on the internet?
Well, I mean,
Without a filter, never.
well, you have to ask.
Exactly.
30 years old. Yep, you
Yeah.
still can't use the
You
internet.
Here's-
always have to have a filter.
Well, you have to define internet because my kids are
Right.
streaming,
Movies.
you know, movies
Right.
or playing
Yeah.
games, and that's technically the internet.
Download.
They're not browsing Google,
Right.
You know,
Let's
or
say
YouTube.
unsupervised internet.
Yeah, I don't think
Is there what age? And then what do you do? What do you guys do with your kids right now in this
I've
age?
seen-
So again, we talked about this before on a podcast. It's just education on the parent side, and this is a learning curve. You have complete control, parents, of your internet at home. What websites can be visited. You literally can call your internet provider company, your ISP, and basically say, I want a list of all the websites that have been visited in my home, and you can go through each one line item and find out, to protect your kids, also to understand like what is being visited, because sometimes your kids might download a free game, which I've seen happen, and that free game takes them to a website they're not supposed to be on. And I mean, listen, the world is not. They're very intentional about getting your kids to those free games and then offsite somewhere else, and so you just have to be aware as parents. But to answer your question. No, like I don't think that there should be unsupervised internet in your home. There should be some type of filter or something. Our kids, there's a trust factor that goes in that too. Where my kids have said, "Hey, Dad, I want to go on here," and I say, "Well, what is it? Can you show me?" Yeah, let me. And then they show me, and I'll say, "Well, what do you think?" And I put it back in their hands, and then they go, "Yeah, probably not." Okay, yeah. And so it's like, but times I have to say, "Yeah, that's not a good one," and so you have to. I think there's some give me's on stuff. They know. They also be very aware, and this is huge. Parents aren't going to want to hear this, and I'm speaking to myself too. Your kids are not naive to what you're looking at on if you have an Instagram or if you have channels on your TV or if you have a Facebook. And so for you to sit there and scroll your Instagram and scroll your Facebook and then watch shows on TV, and then you tell your kids, no, that's not for you. They're not dumb. They just see hypocrisy, and so you have to come to a place where you say that you have good conversations with your kids.
Yes.
That's true.
It's so funny.
They're not naive. What you said something. So I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
you're fine.
And I do want to add to that. You said on Sunday, you said bad parents produce bad kids. Bad parenting can produce bad kids, which I 100% agree with that. And the story of the prodigal son, which I go back to all the time for parenting, there are those moments where you might have a kid that all of a sudden decides like, I am going to just, whatever you said, no. Like, give me my inheritance. Give me, in that story, it says that basically the kid says, I want out of this situation. Now, in that story, we're very aware that the father of that story is God and that he's a good father. But for whatever reason, that kid wants out. and he leaves and he does all this stuff. And then what does he do at the end? He comes back because of the parenting, because of the base. And so you might be sitting there, well, I've done all these things right. I've taken my kids to church every Sunday, and they're chaos. What Pastor Ron just said so huge, the first mention, giving them good base, giving them good foundation. Their kids are going to make decisions.
There's a number one
They're going to
thing,
go
though.
awry.
There's a number one thing there. And we were just talking about this with a group of parents as well. We were talking about how to parent our kids, what schools, how to, friends, all the stuff, right? The internet, everything. But at the end, we said, just make sure your kids know that you love them.
For sure.
So much.
But that comes
because
base.
then they will come back around, right?
But love isn't, and that I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of parents are just like, I love my kids, and they're kind of soft with them, and they don't make hard rules.
That's not what I'm saying.
No. But I want to make that very clear, because just saying, whatever you want to do, we accept. If you choose this lifestyle, that is not love, and that's important that you separate those two things.
And let me go back to make a point about what you said, because again, I don't know the situations people are in out there who's listening to us. But the Bible says, raise a child up in the way they ought to go, and they will not depart from that way. If you look at that word depart, it means stay gone. The prodigal son didn't stay gone.
Right.
He was a good kid.
Right.
It finally dawned on him, I got to go back home. This is stupid living. And so
we were in Nashville with my daughters and my wife, and they wanted to go see a movie. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm down. And they go, what movie should we see? And I said, well, I'd like to see Sound of Freedom. And somebody said, oh, how about Oppenheimer? and I was so my
don't watch it, guys.
So everything was going, and so my daughter, who works for the Daily Wire, she's a talent manager for Daily Wire, and she went there, and so she came home, and her husband, we thought we were going to Oppenheimer, and Tessa came home, and she goes, hey, we're going to go see Sound of Freedom, but she just dropped that bomb, and I'm going, oh, okay. And so her husband's like, well, I thought we wanted to go see Oppenheimer. She says, no, we're not going to see that movie. And I was like, interested, why, So Danny pressed her, and she said, so listen, I talked to our movie critic today at Daily Wire, and he said, oh, both movies are good. She goes, yeah, I was going to think about taking my mom and dad. And he goes, well, then don't go to Oppenheimer. Because there's a bad scene in there. You do not want to be sitting in the theater. And I was so proud of Tessa.
Very awkward moment,
yes.
if you were.
But it was crazy because, she was thinking about us.
That's
and it's funny, she was trying to make a gentle turn for us,
Right, yeah.
but finally she just said, no, we're not going. And I love that, because
That's so cool.
those are things that you do.
There's a respect level.
Yes.
that
You've
they
raised her
have
right.
still.
You've raised her right.
Yeah, and that's the key, because you can depend that thought process is coming in.
But I want to say
places.
something to parents out there that might have a wayward son or daughter. Again, if you raise them right, the book says, and it's a proverb, which is generic, that they will not depart from it or stay gone. And so if you've raised them right, just continue to pray like the father of the prodigal did, and they'll come home.
Yes.
They'll come home. I believe that if you have faith in that promise.
Yeah. But it's just neat to see them go about it, seeing Josh and Romy and Olive, and they're loving to be around the people at church and go to class, and you see your kids, Vince, and those are joyful moments for me.
Well, Vince should have faith. He's watched you. He's watched me, Doug Lohman, Pastor Doug Vegas. We raised our kids right. I mean, to the best of our ability. Anybody's going to look back, and younger guys will too someday, and see how you could have parented better.
Sure.
And believe me, your kids will remind you of it when they get older too. But I think all of us, me and Pastor Tom, Pastor Doug, all of us, Pastor John Tweed, Pastor Hector, we did raise our kids in a right way.
Well, it's
And
not
even though
about-
some of them went away for a while, they all came back.
It's
So
not
that got to
about
give you
being-
guys faith.
It's not about being perfect and getting it right all the time.
Yeah.
It's about trying, having
Yes.
effort, putting effort in,
Being
and,
sincere.
and being sincere, and admitting when you're wrong.
Yes.
That's a big thing.
Also have a lot of hope for those who are listening, and you might think, well, I didn't raise my kid that way because I didn't know Christ till post my kids were out of the house. God is going to do a work in that. I came from a non-Christian home. I didn't have a upbringing where somebody was telling me about Christ, and so it isn't that God isn't going to get a hold of them. So don't think, oh, I've messed up and now they're going to always run away. Just know that God, as you continue to pray, as you said, Pastor Ron, as you continue to have faith and you pray for your kids, I believe God can get a hold of them wherever they're at. In life.
That's a
And
good
so-
point. You're only responsible for what's happening now on.
Right.
And it's called grace, undeserved favor. If you come to Christ and you didn't raise your kids right, go back and ask for a lot of grace. And I think what Josh said, sincerity, to go back to your kids and say, look, I screwed up. I didn't raise you guys right. And now I see what I did wrong. But I'm going to start praying for you that God will make up those years that were really wasted. And I believe God will hear those prayers and he'll make up for that lost time.
I love that we talked about coaching today too, because a lot of this, I think we need parent coaches. I think we need, I think we need a time where we have parents that have done it, that have raised kids, that can help other parents coach. And we talked about coaching today, saying you need a life coach. Some people just need some parent coaching, like
Or
go
just
through some stuff.
mentorship.
A good group of friends, yeah.
I like the idea of mentorship.
Yeah.
And somebody, if they were older and they'd raised their kids, say, hey, this is what I did right. This is
Yeah.
what I did wrong.
Right.
And give us a heads up. Maybe that'd be great.
You have
That
to
would
get a
be awesome.
driver's license. You should have a license to have kids.
Oh, man.
You should
Oh,
have to go
man.
through a training course because a lot of people fail miserably at raising children.
It's crazy that my kid is sitting through classes right now. He has to go through 5 days of driving school class. But you can just have a baby, and they give it right to you at the hospital. They don't ask if you went through the classes. They go,
Nothing.
"Oh, here you go." It's why I remember getting Huntington when they gave him to me, and I go, "Is there some instructions like on breathing or what?" No, they just hand
Oh
you
gosh,
the
when
baby.
they handed us Tara, I go, I think this is a mistake. I don't
like-
think you should hand us this baby.
7
But
out of 10 kids turn green because they don't feed them enough.
Oh, man.
real quickly, because we're not going
Figured
to
out though.
we're not
They
going to have
do.
time to go the direction that I thought we were going.
Yellow.
Today's kind of an introduction coming back, but maybe we should end on this. What are 4 or 5 things you think you should do if you want to raise healthy kids? I mean, maybe we've already mentioned some of them, but what are 4 or 5 things you think you should do that's very important as you look back in raising children?
Don't project your mistakes on your kids. And what I mean by that is if you thought you were supposed to play sports or do this certain thing, don't try to get them to do that same
that's
thing
good.
that you did, because I think that's, a lot of times
good.
Huntington came to me and is like, "I want to swim, Dad." I'm like, "You don't want to play football?" He's like, no, I want to, and so for me, I had to let go of like, he could play football like I did, and like try to live through him, let him do his own
That is
thing.
good.
And so
Good
and
points.
nurture him.
So much healthier.
No,
too.
yeah, and nurture him into the thing that he wants to go. My Kendall wants to do something, and so we're nurturing her into that way. And so let your kids develop into who God's
Well said.
letting them become.
You never can discount the power of prayer. Tiff and I, we were moving Tessa into her dorm room her freshman year, and her husband now, Danny, was there with us. And Tiff and I were putting together a TV stand, and they were in the other room. And Tessa and Danny were both getting freedom because he was going to Fresno State, she was going to Cal Lutheran, and they were talking about, oh, how cool it's going to be. We're not at our parents' house. And I remember hearing Taylor's voice go, "Well, I can tell you this by experience: you're going to feel their prayers." My wife and I looked and we're like,
What a compliment.
Oh, it was funny because we were looking at each other and we're like, really?
Wow.
And it was just funny. They were, and we it's almost like you heard it from the other camp, that was something that you could feel. And she just says, so don't mistake that. Told 2 young freshmen in college, don't think, hey, you got all this freedom now because mom and dad's prayer will help guide
Tom,
you.
we intentionally pray in front of our little grandkids. Debbie and I probably do it every day they're there. And we'll have a situation and we'll pray right there. Let's pray right now. Debbie will say, "Pray right now, Ron, pray." And those little granddaughters are soaking up every moment of it as we pray in front of them. They're learning
And
to
they
pray.
come home and they will stop me and say, "We need to pray about this, Dad." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. We should."
Grandparents, you have a big role.
You do.
No, it's huge.
I can see that.
It's huge.
I don't have it yet, but I mean, I see it from pastors.
Yeah, it's really important, and you guys do most things right, so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Except the cartoons, I'll come in sometimes. I'm babysitting maybe
Dad,
for what?
Dad, you let the kids watch Cops.
Hey, that's quality television
You mean
right
bad
there.
boys, what you
yeah,
gonna
the
do?
show.
I didn't know that they never saw Cops. So I'm watching
Their
Cops.
eyes are like this
And
big.
Olive is in there, and man, she is glued to the TV. And I didn't know they've never seen Cops. And so probably a week
Because,
went by, and I was watching it again, and man, she turned the cartoons off, and she was in there.
Yeah, she loved it. She was telling me all about it. Daddy, there's this bad guy, and they caught him, and they put handcuffs on him. I'm like,
See,
okay.
being grandparents, sometimes you forget these little things like watching Cops.
Though
You
they-
probably shouldn't
You
do
let
that.
your guard down, right?
You let your guard
For
down.
about a week, they were definitely afraid of police officers. They're like, "What? There's Daddy. There's a cop."
Because they were throwing people on the ground and jumping on the cops. Cops were kind of like beating them up, and Olive, man, her eyes were like saucers, going, "Whoa!"
Sorry, they're resilient. I would say that the big thing with parenting is really listen to your kids.
Yeah.
That's
really
good.
listen to
That's
them.
huge.
Truly listen to them, because
Yeah.
it's important to know where they're coming from. And a lot of times you'll realize that they are coming from just a selfish, childish place.
Right.
But sometimes they're not. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes they really have a need that isn't being met, and so you have to make sure that their needs are being met.
Well,
That's
you
huge.
know, we were all over the place today, but we've just come back from a long break and
But
pretty excited to be back.
The
and,
overarching theme I think of today was make every moment count, right?
yeah, I guess you could title
And
it that.
Do the
yeah.
best, you know, with what you have.
Well, I sometimes I get up like this morning and realize all the stuff I have to do, and my mind is all over the place, and I think it comes out in the podcast. But nevertheless,
Well,
I hope you got something out of it
And we
today.
missed you guys.
just like parenting, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, we're
doesn't.
putting the effort in. So,
So we love you guys, and we're glad to be back, and we'll
Yep.
be here every Tuesday morning, right?
Yep.
Yep.
all right, see you guys.
Bye.
God bless.
You got your mama's sunshine. You got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven